Hey everyone, it's me, Bo, back once again with another cult movie review. Hope everyone is doing good. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the 2001 erotic drama Intimacy. This is somewhat of a forgotten movie. It was kind of controversial when it came out at the time, but I don't really hear too many people talk about it these days. Let's get into it. Oh, and of course, guys, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you like the videos that I do. So, Intimacy from 2001 was directed by the French filmmaker Patrice Chéreau and starred the brilliant Mark Rylance and Australian actress Kerry Fox. Now, I've known about this film for many years. It was only maybe about a year ago that I actually sat down and watched Intimacy for the very first time. The British actor Mark Rylance was in the lead role, playing the character Jay, a troubled man who had just split from his wife. Now living alone, the loss of his family had become pretty detrimental to his life. And throughout the movie, we saw various flashbacks to Jay's past when he was still with his wife and kids before the breakup. He had little communication with his then wife, and it seemed like she neglected his sexual needs. I mean, in some ways you could say it become a loveless marriage, and with the use of the flashbacks, it did give us, the audience, the kind of context we needed to understand Jay's conflicted mindset. Kerry Fox, the Australian actress, played the character Claire, Jay's lover. She was a married woman with a child, and every Wednesday she would meet up with Jay at his place to basically have sex with him. This was a routine that they had, but by any means this was not a normal functioning relationship. And when the two did meet, there was basically no communication. They were not speaking to each other. It was a purely sexual relationship. But with Jay's increasing inner struggles, he basically found himself falling for Claire, to the point where he even started to follow her after she left his place. Jay wanted to know more about her. Like, the sex between them just wasn't enough for him. His lust had seemed to turn into love, and he couldn't maintain this arrangement he and Claire had originally agreed to. To make things more complicated, Jay would later on bump into Claire's husband, Andy, played by Timothy Spall. Andy was this kind, soft, loving guy who was just a supportive husband, helping out when his wife was doing acting classes. He was completely unaware of what his wife was up to every Wednesday. And you felt bad for the guy. The whole narrative, the whole plot was very interesting. Originally when I first watched it, I didn't really know where this was going, but once Timothy Spall was introduced, things got really complicated for everyone. Unsurprisingly, actor Mark Rylance delivered a brilliant performance as the lead character, Jay. Rylance came from a theatre background, so in some ways you could describe him as a modern day thespian. In Intimacy, Rylance really showed off his acting abilities, playing this jilted lover, lost, confused, and not really being able to handle his current life post-breakup. He got married, he had kids, and I guess for him, he thought that was going to be his life. He was going to grow old with this woman. He was going to see his kids grow up. And now, suddenly, he'd become a weekend dad. The final scene with Jay and Claire having a heart-to-heart. Jay just couldn't cope anymore. He wanted Claire, and he eventually had the courage to admit that to her. He wanted her to leave Andy, her husband, and be with him, but Claire just couldn't do it. And when Claire finally admitted this to Jay, and he come to the realization that he was going to be alone and he couldn't have Claire, man, the expression on his face, you know, the whole thing, you got a real sense of sadness. And when Jay had to accept the rejection and watch Claire walk out of his life for good, you know, you felt bad for him as well. You know, it was just brilliant work from Mark Rylance, who, interestingly, wouldn't start in another movie until 2008. In addition to this, I have to give credit to Kerry Fox, who did a great job as Claire. She was a character that was unhappy with her own life, dealing with her own issues. This weekly routine that she had with Jay almost acted as like a escape from the reality that she was actually living. From her interactions to her dialogue, even down to her appearance, it all felt very natural. Now, I've been a fan of Kerry Fox ever since I saw her in the Danny Boyle film Shallow Grave, which once again she gave a great performance. So yeah, credit to her. She was perfect for the role. In terms of settings, I have to give credit to the cinematographer Eric Gautier, who captured the essence of what London was, and in some ways still is. You know, kind of grotty, kind of concrete, and kind of grey. The film's grubby aesthetic with the busy roads and the dingy pubs and the messy apartments, it was all there on show. Even though this was made by a French filmmaker and obviously a French crew, the film did in some ways feel very British. So credit to those guys for, making it work. Now, before we get into dislikes, let's talk about the fellatio scene in the movie. So, there is a scene about midway through the film where Jay and Claire meet up once again. This time, the scene began with Jay laying on the floor while he received oral sex from Claire. While in most movies these sex acts are simulated, this time, there was no prosthetic penis involved. It was the real deal. Now, I have to ask myself, was that really necessary? It was fine for what it was. I wasn't offended in any way. I was just a little bit surprised that the director and the actors decided to take that approach. Both Kerry Fox and Mark Rylance are great actors, and they had more than enough talent to make the audience believe their lustful relationship. When this movie came out in 2001, for sure, that scene generated a lot of controversy and definitely gave the movie some publicity. Yeah, maybe that was the reason to, get people talking about the film. I don't know, but yeah, just seemed a little bit strange. What did it really achieve other than enticing, young teenage boys or sex deviants to watch the film for that sole purpose? If I'm honest, it really didn't do anything for the overall story. And I'm kind of surprised that Mark Rylance actually went through with this scene, because he was married at the time of filming. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess he just must have a very understanding wife. And so, dislikes for Intimacy 2001. I must say, there wasn't really any major issues I had with the film. Throughout, I was fully engrossed with the story, and overall, it had a good pace. When I think back, perhaps more backstory to the main characters would have maybe improved the narrative. It wasn't a case of me not understanding the characters' motivations. I mean, that was, pretty obvious. I just think maybe more scenes involving Jay and his ex-wife Susan, for example, potentially could have heightened the movie's quality. In some ways, the lack of certain bits of information, made the audience, stay on its toes and kind of think about what was going on. Still, I think maybe some additional flashbacks or maybe more scenes between Claire and her husband Andy would have been welcomed. And so, ratings for Intimacy 2001. I'm going to be rating this movie a solid 7 out of 10. Intimacy is a well-made, emotional drama that featured this intriguing storyline loosely based on the concept of infidelity and insecurity. It was a very believable drama about real people dealing with real emotions and having real interactions. Nothing felt forced, and I found myself, as I said, fully engrossed with the whole plot. The sex scenes between Jay and Claire were intense, but they were never erotic. And with that, it added a true sense of realism to the film. The scenes never leaned on voyeurism or titillation, which I did find quite refreshing. And unlike your typical Hollywood production, this movie did feel very grounded at times, more like a pseudo-documentary or something. The plot kept the audience guessing about what was going to happen to these two lovers and how it would ultimately affect their lives. I mean, this is a sad film and not an easy watch. Indeed, the film challenges the viewer with some compelling imagery and themes that a general audience might not necessarily like. If you've not seen Intimacy yet, I'd definitely give it a go. Filmmaking like this is pretty non-existent these days.